What was the largest flying bird? Interesting question. We do a lot of what was the largest things around here. We haven't quite gotten to birds, and I'm sure some of you are like, well, duh, it was the dinosaurs. Well, first of all, you're wrong on two counts. A, dinosaurs aren't birds, they're closely related, and many of them evolved into birds eventually, but dinosaurs are not birds. Birds are dinosaurs, they're underneath the umbrella of dinosaurs, but dinosaurs themselves aren't birds, they haven't gotten there. That's A. B, very, 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 very few dinosaurs ever actually flew. It may have been zero. The ones we think might have flown may not have even been sustained. It depends which one we're talking about, but the vast majority of them were terrestrial. Because pterosaurs aren't dinosaurs, as I'm sure many of you know. They're reptiles. Granted, among pterosaurs, the largest living things to fly do exist, but we're talking specifically about birds. Flying birds. Now, there were a lot of big chunkus birds. The terror-birds, for example, were among those. And there are some even bigger than they were. But those ones didn't fly. They were flightless, like ostriches. We're talking about flying birds. And for this particular category, we have two contenders. Oh yes, there are two. The first, and the one that comes up the most, which is a fair response, is Argentavis. There's only one species underneath this genus, Argentavis magnificens, which, phenomenal, actually. Brilliant name. For a long time, it was believed that these were, in fact, the largest birds to have ever flown. Their exact size estimates do vary quite a bit, but their maximum wingspan could have been 21 feet 4 inches. For reference, here's a size comparison, and oh no. Yeah, they were big. Big birds. Big flying birds. That's horrifying. And while it isn't exactly known what their dietary habits were, they aren't believed to have been necessarily apex predators in the technical sense. They weren't hawks. They were probably more like vultures or condors, meaning that they were scavengers. Very, very large, terrifying scavengers, but scavengers. Perhaps even using their large size to scare off actual predators so that they could steal kills from them. It's not clear exactly what would have driven them to extinction, but given how huge they were, I would personally guess a food shortage was involved. They lived during the late Miocene, and the thing about being big, regardless of what span of time we're discussing here, is that you need a lot of fuel in order to stay alive. The bigger you get, the more fuel you need. So larger creatures, while size is good for survival, it only stays that way if there's enough food. If they were scavengers, they'd be dependent on other carnivores killing things, and if the other carnivores ran into trouble, so too would Argentavis. Granted, that doesn't mean, of course, they could feed on naturally dying herbivores, but if the herbivores were struggling too, eventually you would run out of food. You see the problem, I think. And they are still, to this day, considered the heaviest birds to have ever flown, possibly weighing up to 160 friggin' pounds. And as a result, in terms of sheer, straight-up mass, they are the largest known flying birds in the history of our planet. But they don't have the longest wingspan anymore. In 2014, they were superseded by another genus, Pelagornis, which has 4 different species under it. The one we're gonna focus on, though, is Pelagornis sandersi. That particular species has an estimated wingspan of an astonishing 24.2 feet, beating out Argentavis in that particular category. But they weren't as heavy as Argentavis. These birds were a lot skinnier. In their case, they actually would have been carnivores. They were pseudotooth birds, close relatives of modern-day pelicans or storks. The pseudo part of the tooth thing is that, well, they appear to have teeth, but they're more like extensions of their bill. They don't have enamel, and they don't grow in sockets like proper teeth. They also aren't lost and replaced. Basically, their bill was literally shaped to have teeth in effect, just not in the way we'd think of them. They had short, stumpy legs, and probably could only take off by hopping off of cliff edges. And they're believed to have had habits that would have been similar to their modern-day relatives, namely, they ate a lot of fish. Just so much fish. Delicious fish. Though they weren't alive at the same time as Argentavis. Pelagornis lived between the late Oligocene and the early Pleistocene. In terms of why they died out, we still don't know. Paleontologists are actually still looking into that as we speak. They aren't really sure why this animal would have died out. Though, again, much like Argentavis, given their size, I would hazard a guess it was a food shortage. It seems to be the biggest reason why a lot of these animals wind up going extinct. As for why the food shortage occurred, it's hard to say. This particular genus was pretty widespread, so it would have had to have been a nearly global issue to drive them out. But obviously they are, because frankly, I doubt anybody would find it easy to miss a giant bird with the wingspan of a friggin' plane just hanging out. You know, one of those things. So they're not around now, but over time, maybe more data will be gathered, and we'll figure out exactly why they aren't around now. I'm not sure anyone's really complaining. Granted, one was a scavenger and one was a fish eater. They actually might not have been that big of a threat to us. The Argentavis was about as tall as the average adult male, and that's just horrifying. No, we don't. You know what? Actually, we're good. I think we're good. And with that, a special thank you to all my apex predators, Metal for Life Guy, Dr. Rachel 78, and Arthur Roy. Till next time, this is Darkness, an individual of fun. Farewell.